I am so excited to be interviewing Adam Coffey today. He is a Renaissance businessman. Every book he writes is a bestseller. You can buy them on Amazon, and I would recommend that right away. And I'll give you more information at the end of the podcast. But I have learned so much from this man. The first time I heard him speak, I didn't get out of my seat for 4 hours, and that is a record for me in my entire life. He has so much value to offer, and he's a business titan. So, Adam, we're going to get started right away. I'm just so excited to talk to you. What are you working on right now that we can tell the viewers about?
Well, first of all, I'm glad to be here on your podcast. I've known you now. I'm thinking going back, are we talking like 3 years, 4 years, something like that? Since I think you came to seminar number one.
I
You
did, and well, the first time I saw you was at the meeting with JT, and you were in the audience talking, and then he came out, and you two had a chemistry.
that was
You were hilarious.
mega
You were so
something. It
informative.
was
It was
mega
amazing.
success, but I don't remember what number it was. So it's a
Yeah,
long.
it was several years. It was
Yeah.
several years
So
ago. I'm not
it's
sure.
I'm glad to be here. Hello to all your listeners out there. I'm pleased to call you a client, pleased to call you a friend, member of the chairman group, but glad to be here with you. What am I working on? It's funny you mentioned seminars because, in addition to doing seminars, which I typically do like four or so a year, um, I do training just repetitively, constantly. Every time I have new clients come on board, it's like the people that get the most out of working with me. There's an element of education, then an element of strategic planning, and then it's all about tactical execution. Some people come to me and there's Adam, I got problems, and we work through those problems. But the people that get the most go kind of the full Monty. It includes training, but to be honest with you, Stephanie, it's like I find myself doing that maybe the same training 30, 40 times a year, with groups, with management teams. And I'm really getting bored of doing it. And so I'm in the studio as we speak. Well, not this second, but right now I
Right,
am
right,
currently
right.
filming Empire Builder, the course. And so
Wow, great idea.
people that want, and it's not that I don't want to impart the wisdom, it's that, boy, from a time efficiency standpoint, if I'm doing the same training over and over and over again with my clients, it's necessary for them, but it's a huge time investment on my side. And so I'm filming this thing. I got the interest, the idea came to me when I was in Australia at the Sofitel Hotel, and they had this big, beautiful digital wall. And I'm like, boy, I wish I had cameras rolling when I was doing this seminar, and I didn't. So I'm in the studio. We are filming Empire Builder, the course, right now. It'll be out by early next year. And then for me, anytime one of my clients needs that training, or their management team needs that training, instead of me having to do the same thing over and over again live, I'm going to send them to the course, which will become a precursor to working with me one on one. And again, my clients that do the training and then we work on strategy and tactical execution get so much further ahead faster when they do the full thing. So that's what I'm working on right
All right,
now.
that makes so
Coming
much
soon.
sense. That makes so much sense. I study with Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he requires you to take a course before you can come to a retreat. So
Yeah.
it makes so much sense, the repetition for you to
I
do it.
get it now.
You don't get any value
It's
from that, but you can go so much further.
yeah, it's not a money thing. It's a
No,
time efficiency thing.
it's
And
almost
so
like
I can
AI. I
serve
mean, the
more
basic knowledge
clients.
is in AI. You can just go further. You can build on it and amplify.
Sure,
So I think that's
absolutely.
really brilliant. I think that's
So
really brilliant.
so book number five is done. It's fully
Wow.
completed, and it's what I call in the can. And I'm trying to decide when next year I'm going to release it. But book five's done. It's coming. But it's
What is the
top
title of
secret.
this going to be? Do we have a title yet or no?
Still working. Still a work in progress on the title. But
So are you at four
essentially,
bestsellers? Do you have four bestsellers right
I
now?
do four number one bestsellers. So this will be number five.
So does that
Hopefully,
mean, are you number
fingers
one, two,
crossed.
three, and four? Are you like the top four bestseller? Probably in your niche.
So,
I
so
bet you are.
yeah, I'm flattered because ChatGPT recommends my books, so when,
Oh, really?
and it's interesting because a lot of my
That's
clients are
huge.
having some issues, the ways of generating leads for a lot of businesses for many years. It was all about SEO, it was about Google AdWords and, Facebook ads and things like that. And it's like the world of marketing has completely shifted. And consumers are now going to places, to AI-based tools instead of like Google and
You're
saying,
right.
hey, who's a good local this or that, or I need one of these. And AI right now currently is not being properly monetized by the companies that have the platforms, in my opinion. So they're more focused on getting content good and making sure. So as an example, AI is very friendly to me because I've been on hundreds of podcasts, because I write books, because I write
Oh,
for Forbes. AI is more about content.
so it has all your content that it can draw on.
Yes. And
Brilliant.
so and so there's a
Brilliant.
ton of and it's from different sources. So
Okay. Yes.
200 separate podcasts, with hundreds of
Oh, with
different
it, like with
hosts.
me, here you are with me, which is a whole different
Yes. And
kind
and
of
and
genre.
so,
Wow. Yeah.
again, it's like, I get asked to do podcasts all the time. I limit it to one a week. I think we're booked into next year. But when
Really,
you
I'm honored even more
but when
now.
you wanted to do this, I'm like, I'm in.
And I booked this months ago.
Yes. Okay.
I
So
did.
to be
I
fair, then yeah,
little
you
little did I know I was going to be in Australia at 5:30 in the morning when we had our podcast. And the times are so crazy now because even though I'm
it's
in Brisbane
5:30 in the
now.
morning. You're in Australia right now?
I am.
Oh wow.
And
You're
not
very
only
put
that, I'm in
together for
Brisbane.
5:30. So you
And who
either
knew
didn't
it's
go
an
to
hour before
bed.
Sydney? I mean, it's crazy. The times are crazy here. I had my own
Yes.
formula and I worked it out, but I found out I was wrong yesterday. So now I'm relying on the world clock.
Yes.
So I'm thrilled to be talking to you today. One thing I wanted to ask you, I mean, you're very strong in developing a corporate culture because one of your main strengths is the fact that you've managed and acquired companies and grown them very big and sold them for huge amounts of money. I mean, you're in the billions of these executions of these deals now. And when you're at the very but you also talk at the very basic start, like the basic unit economics, how to start. And that's where I think that would be a lot of value to a lot of the viewers who aren't at the big end of it yet. And I love the way you focus on meticulous planning and really getting to know your numbers and knowing how much it is very at the very basic level for the very first operation. I think from my end, I'm more involved in like the health end. So how do you feel going forward? How do you feel that workplaces are incorporating the wellness of their employees to build the corporate culture when you're starting to build and
Yeah,
group companies
so,
together?
so first of all, society continues to evolve at an alarming and rapid pace. And, gone are the days, when I started in the corporate world, way back in the Stone Ages, back at at GE in the heyday, the Jack Welch era. It was my way or the highway. It was you do this, and it was always the carrot and the stick. Big bonus, big stick, get fired. It's like hit numbers. And people, I don't want to call us a commodity, but the culture was very different back then. And I was kind of a rabble rouser. And early on in my CEO career, when I finally became a CEO, I cared about people and I cared about taking care of employees. And I was preaching a different gospel at that time. And it was all
Right.
about, hey, take care of people. People take care of customers. Customers like being taken care of. And they give us more stuff to do, and revenue rains from the sky. The secret to success in building any large company is building a strong culture. And I'd say that in today's environment, nobody wants to work anymore. Everybody wants to be a TikTok millionaire. It's like, hey, I want to be on dad's couch in the basement. I'm not going to work. I don't want to go to work anymore. That's not for me. But if we're going to build a big company, if we're going to build an empire, we're going to need people. We're going to need lots and lots of people. So getting people to work is hard in today's world. And so we have to treat them a little differently than maybe we did way back when, early in my career. And so
Interesting.
now we have to bring them our vision. We have to talk to them about what it is that we're trying to create and what's in it for them and why they should want to, aspire to achieve more and do more. And a piece of that is wellness. And you've heard me heard me talk about this before, I always tell people my goal when building a company is to create an environment where employees can spend their entire career. They can spend their life, their whole career working in my company. And to do that, I need to do three things. I have to pay a fair wage, I have to have good benefits, and and most importantly, I have to create opportunity, for advancement if someone's
Perfect.
going to spend
Yes.
their entire career with me. But wellness, health, wellness, this is a piece of this. If my vision is to have an employee start with me young and grow old with me, or start middle age and grow old with me, then we have to be cognizant. And this generation is a whole lot more cognizant about health than my generation was. My generation at night, it's like it's a bourbon and a cigar, and guess
Exactly.
what? It still is for me. But for a lot of young people, it's like I don't drink. It's like, and exercise has become a big piece of their DNA and their
Right.
regularly scheduled routine. And so wellness, I'd say there's a huge awareness. First, it was the baby boomers who were getting older, and I'm a baby boomer, so I can talk about myself. And
Same. Same.
it's us wanting to survive longer, and it's like, okay,
Right.
we had a lot of bad habits. How can we fix that? But the younger
Perfect.
generation, I think, the future generations, they're more focused on it earlier, and so health and wellness is something that's very much important. My generation, we're making up for previous sins. Current generations are focused on being healthy from the get-go.
I think they're seeing what's happening to a lot of people our age group who are, if they're very overweight or they have a lot of health issues, they don't want to end up like that. And
Yeah,
preventative measures are really important. If you have I mean, you don't have to be perfect. You can have a cigar and a bourbon once in a while, but if you want to be healthy, you have to add exercise. There's all kinds of things. And it's not just physical health. I think part of what you offer is the satisfaction with what your purpose is huge. I mean,
yeah, and so
you can
Steph,
be in,
I for your
yeah.
listeners out there, I have to blame you for constantly putting it in my face. And between a Beamer and Richard Fallon and his wrist things, and all of this, that's like you and Richard are probably the two biggest influencers on how to live a healthy
We're
and
trying. We're trying because we love being alive, and this is really it's a fascinating time on the planet. It's a gift to be alive,
it
and we don't want
is,
to
it's a
ruin it
blessing
by
for sure.
well, I mean, once you lose your health, you're just not it takes
And
everything
it can
away.
happen, so quickly to so many
Right.
people. It can change just at the drop of a coin. I remember when I turned 50, my 50th birthday present was, knowing something was wrong with my heart, and
Oh,
you know
no.
and having nobody, figure out what it was, but I knew something was off, and me having, sticking with it and CD 3D angiography later, and it's like, well, Adam, it's like you're fine. And then they look at the results. Oh, what are you doing tomorrow? We got to get you on a cath lab. You got a 90%
And
blockage.
that's
And so it's like, it can change on a dime.
it can
For
change on a dime.
yeah,
However, in pretty much every situation, unless it's gone too far, there's things you can do to reverse. And when they wanted to put me on a cath lab, I freaked out because I'm a wimp. And I said, I know this is a false diagnosis. I want to have another test. Give me, and by the time I had the other test, I hadn't had any fat or animal products for a month. My blood was perfect. So
it's your
there's
health.
always a
Since this
way. There's a
podcast is really
desperate
about health
way.
and wellness, let's just talk about, as we get to be affluent and successful in business, if we want to enjoy the fruits of that labor for longer, then, hey, we have to focus on health. At some point, at some level, we have to focus on health. Says the guy who went to Taco Bell for lunch. Shh, don't tell anybody. In moderation, right? So I balance it with
Moderate. Well,
McDonald's. No, I'm joking. Yeah.
you make healthy choices 80% of the time.
If we can
And the
do
other
that, we'd be
20%,
we'd be in good shape.
right. And the other 20%, you want to enjoy the pleasure of life. And that's Ayurvedic. That's ancient Indian kind of
Yes.
thought. And I totally agree with that because otherwise you're so frustrated and you feel so deprived. I mean, your mind plays all kinds of tricks on you. It really
Yes.
does. One of the major things that's really special in Australia, as they say themselves, is the coffee. And I like coffee. I have one in the morning or I stay up all night, but I noticed it's a lot stronger here because when I was late having it once, my head started pounding. And so you have to be careful with your choices.
You
Um,
do.
I was wondering, one of the things you really are strong about is building a corporate culture. And do you see a trend in employers taking more interest? I think one of the things you do, you're very interested in the employees participating in the game. Because if they're participating in the success, their life's
Yeah.
purpose is
So, so,
elevated so
so we
much. And
got
I
off
think
on a
that's so
tangent.
beautiful.
You had asked me a previous question. So let me just, for your listeners out there who are focused on building a business, I don't care what kind of industry you're in, all companies become successful small. And it's all about unit level economics. And it's all about trying to figure out what is the basic unit level that I need to be successful at. And if I can find success at that level, I could literally build $1 billion business. Only 3,000 companies on the planet have $1 billion in revenue, and I've built multiple of them. And you can get there if the basic fundamentals are sound. And so for me, think about any type of business. I use a lot of blue collar businesses as examples. And so, I've got a person in a truck, and they're pick your, they're an HVAC, they're a plumber, they're an electrician, they're a landscape maintenance company, a pest control company. I don't care. It's like, find the unit level. What's the basic unit level? Well, I can't succeed with half a person and half a truck if I'm doing pest control as an example. And so, how much revenue can I generate with that one person in that one truck? What are the costs to hire that employee, to give them the best benefits on the planet, to give them a good retirement plan, to do all these things we talk about that are a part of this culture, because I want to have the best benefits in an industry. I want to become the lighthouse that attracts talent, since nobody wants to work and we need people. I want to have the best, benefits package. I want to have a great pay scale. I want to take care of my employees. How much revenue can I generate with that unit level? Is it enough to cover all of those expenses and earn, at least a 30% gross profit? And I'd like a 35% gross profit, but if I can earn 30, my 30-20-10 rule applies. I should be able to keep the cost of customer acquisition in the back office under 20%, which lets me make at least a dime on a dollar, which is the minimum acceptable profit that we as a for-profit concern need to generate. And and my ideal is 35, 15, 20. I want to make 20 cents on a dollar, at maturity. But if I can figure out the magic small, then, and that math works. I build a revenue model, an expense model, an overhead model, a capital expenditure model. And I call this napkin math. So how many clients can a unit serve? Or if I'm a product company, it's what's my cost to produce a product? Can I generate enough gross profit to cover the advertising, the customer acquisition, whatever we want to call it, to generate the minimum acceptable profit? If I can figure it out small, and small is where I want to figure this stuff out, because that's my period to incubate. I'm in the laboratory. I don't want to build a giant company that's not profitable, because I'll build a giant set of losses and I'll be bankrupt in no time. So I want to figure out how this company is going to work small. Don't worry about growth until I'm at least 30, 20, 10. And if I can get to 35, 15, 20, even better. But once I get the magic dialed in, now I'm ready to scale. To scale, we're going to need employees one way or another. And so, end of the day, I need a strong culture. And because I think the reason why I care so much about people and culture is because I literally held every job you could hold on an org chart. And as I climbed my way up, I used to be the worker bee, the guy in the truck, the manager, the mid-level manager, and so I know that I added value as a junior person, and I know that all of my employees, regardless of where they're at, on my org chart, they're adding tremendous value, and we're all in this together. And at the end of the day, titles don't matter. How much money is in the bank doesn't matter. Were we good to each other? Were we good to the world around us? Did we give back? What's the legacy that we're leaving behind? And so building a successful business starts with culture, and then it's getting the unit level economics correctly. And then I'm ready to scale, and I can scale to any level, on the planet. Once it works, it works. When it doesn't work, it never works. When it gets better, bigger, it doesn't magically fix itself. So these are the things that, from a business perspective, that we have to focus on. But in order to be mentally sharp, in order to make sound business decisions, health is a piece of that. And being healthy, taking care of our employees, having great benefits, encouraging their development, and their ability to be healthy, all of these things yield productivity gains.
Well, that's the thing. Don't you think that it'll help increase productivity and that'll have a strong effect on the growth of the company?
It
Because they're
does.
feeling well and they're engaged and their future is bright because of being with that company and they have opportunity, they have room to advance and they have room to participate in the game. I think
Yes.
that really gives someone a reason to
So,
want to come to
you
work.
mentioned that. So, well, let's circle back on that part now. So I do like to bring as many employees as I possibly can along for that wealth creation ride. Now, sometimes it's a matter of, hey, a growth company provides promotional opportunities. And so a growing company that's doing well needs new levels of management. I need a VP of this, a director of that, and I'd prefer to hire from within people who know the company, understand the culture, are working hard, provide them with those opportunities for, promotion. And then at some point, at some level, I love to incentivize employees with, some form of a long-term program, a stock incentive plan or a phantom equity plan. And I'm seeing, Stephanie, to be honest with you, so many entrepreneurs just in the last 12 months that I work with have started, I'll call it long-term incentive plans for their employees, and they're all wanting to
Nice.
share in the wealth creation and help motivate, and these represent giant paydays for normal people, people that normally would not have access to this level of a bonus or that level of a bonus. And if I think back, to my last company, my last few companies, I created 72 multimillionaires, with
That's
my
fabulous.
exits. And for these people, that's a life-changing event. But, hey, for a mid-level manager that makes 60, 70, 80,000 a year, what if you could earn 1 to 3 times your salary, as a bonus? That's like winning the lotto for
It
some
is.
people.
And it makes life so much more, I mean, that you feel really valued. And
Yeah.
that's huge for mental health. And that, I mean, it's all a part of it. You can be physically healthy, but if you're mentally not healthy and your financial health's really important too. This is a very expensive
This
time to
stuff
live
is
in.
all stitched together at some level. It really
Totally.
is.
I agree. I agree. So I really admire what you do because I feel like you're an employee advocate. I mean, you're a big business titan and you've been, I mean, the way you describe private equity was life-changing for me because I had viewed them differently, even though my second husband was involved in that. The way you described it, it made it so much more approachable and understandable. And I recommend people to read your book about that because that made it
Well, you know what? I mean, that's why I wrote those books. On the news today, I don't care what we listen to, I don't care what your political leanings are. Although mine are pretty self-evident in my flags and veteran and all that stuff up there. But, no matter what your political leanings are, or what your belief system, truly is, all we hear on the news is bad stuff. We don't hear good news. We only hear bad stuff. And so everybody is colored by negative media bias, towards everything. Everything
okay.
sucks, because what sucks appeals to a base, and that gets us listening and fired up, and they build a loyal follower. But
Sensationalist
it's
aspect.
like the private equity that I was working with was not the private equity that I'm hearing about on TV. Not every private equity firm is out there to screw people or destroy a company. These are people who are investing in people. They're investing in leadership teams. They want to grow empires. And yes, they have to generate returns for their investors. But those investors, they're people too. And they may be pension funds and university endowments and people, but ultimately, that's how capitalism is supposed to work. And the companies that I was building had great cultures. They really took care of employees. We were kind of leading our industry in terms of benefits packages and things that we offered for employees. I was sponsoring people with their education, their MBAs. I was doing all kinds of stuff, all focused around building a great culture. And I was owned by PE for decades, 9 different PE firms as I was building my different companies.
Not nine.
And
Yeah.
universally, all of these PE firms wanted to see us succeed, and they encouraged us to do the things that we did. And I have this one short story that I share, about private equity. When COVID hit, I was owned by a PE group called Ares Management, and they're one of the largest. They're the world's largest non-bank lender of debt, but they're also a giant PE firm as well. And I remember when COVID hit, they started a foundation inside every portfolio company that they had, and they seeded it
Oh,
with six-figure sums of capital from their own coffers and said, CEOs, we want you to take care of your employees, people who are impacted negatively, death in the family, and eventually that morphed into people who suffer any kind of catastrophic loss, whether it's a flood, a fire, anything, a death in the family. And, it's like, well, you didn't hear about that on the news, and how many
right.
millions of dollars people invested in these foundations for charitable purposes. It's like all we hear about is PE destroys companies and screws
Yeah.
over founders. And so I started writing, my first book, the Private Equity Playbook, to kind of educate, this generation into what private equity actually was and how it operates, and more importantly, how you could work within its confines to be successful, and to teach people that your first exit is not the end of the road. It's just the
And
first
that's really fascinating. I don't
it's
think
the
most
first
people
rest
see
stop.
beyond that. I think they
Yeah,
see
most
one
people don't.
exit. And
Yeah.
that was fascinating. You had several occasions where you sold the company several times, and each
Yes.
time it grew bigger, and it was really
My
fascinating.
personal record is five paydays, selling the same company, in a 13-year period, and going through multiple different levels of ownership, from family owned and operated through multiple flips of private equity. And, it's like a great company continues to grow, and there's no reason why you as a founder, or as a senior executive needs to leave. You can keep on going while you're diversifying your assets and taking some chips off the table. And you don't have to be the control investor, you can be a minority investor. Just ask Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, the two richest guys on the planet, who collectively own less than 13% of their respective companies. So
Good point.
you can make that transition from founder to minority shareholder, but still invested in and growing and working in your company. Only now you're using other people's money to grow, and to buy other companies and do the things that you do when you're scaling. And so I have found, is it intense? Sure. And why do most, founders fail? Well, they just got handed a bunch of money and they became filthy rich, and they decide they don't want to work anymore. They don't want to work very hard. And with PE, that's business at a professional sport. It's intense. But they
The
share
professional sport.
rewards,
I like
with
that.
the employees. That last company I mentioned, we not only had members of management that were shareholders in the company, but we were giving out as many as 300 to 400 grants a year
Really?
to line employees, people in cubicles. We had over 3,000 employees, and so we had people in cubicles, people in trucks, and we were giving out 300 to 400 grants per year to just regular old employees. And some of the bigger PE firms recently, KKR is a good example, started doing some experiments where they gave every employee in the company a share of the upside in the wealth creation. So a lot of stuff going on, but there's good and bad in any industry. But my experience with PE has been, wholly positive.
Let's talk about the grants for a minute. That's really an interesting concept. So if an employee wanted to, I don't know, maybe learn how to do some kind of like even personal training or something some
So a
other.
lot of that stuff would be built into our health insurance plan, where we would have health and wellness plans and a lot of different opportunities for people to do. But so the grants, yeah, I shouldn't say grant. We were giving stock, phantom stock, like stock options to
Uh-huh.
employees so that
Okay.
they could participate in the wealth creation, not a
Okay.
grant to fund something that they were doing or seeking to do. Although we were sponsoring people for their MBAs, we were,
Education.
we
Yeah.
were helping people get education at every level of the company, primarily because we needed to prepare them for future promotions, and growth, and that's a part of that culture building. So
That makes so much sense. So you're educating them and they become more valuable for the company.
Yeah.
And let's talk about the insurance. Did you have insurance programs that encourage people to join gyms and things like that and become healthier? Did you
So,
provide any
so
kind of
we had all
education?
kinds, of, when you get, big companies that have large plans with big carriers,
Yes,
there's so many add-on, and boy, it isn't just health in a physical sense either, and wellness, which included nutritional type programs that people could participate in, but it also included financial health and
that's what I
financial,
wanted to know about.
different,
Yes,
so health and wellness is mind, body, wallet. There's many aspects
absolutely.
to,
I
to,
totally
to
agree.
that. And so, having all these different plans that employees could take, advantage of. And those who really understood them and did take advantage of them loved them, and got a lot of benefit from them. So I would tell your listeners out there, if you're working for a big company or mid-sized company, it's like, check out what your health plan actually includes and what it has available, because so many people don't take advantage of all the different offerings that some of these large company plans have.
And I guess you're seeing a trend for that to continue. It seemed like for a while it was going back the other way and they were taking it away, but hopefully
The
changing. People are more
world
aware.
continues to morph, but I would say, again, in the 80s, it was my way or the highway, right? And the 90s, and, somewhere in about the 2010s, all of a sudden it started shifting, and people wanted to know what a company stood for, and they wanted to know, from a governance perspective, what owners and shareholders and people believed, and what they were focused on, and they started caring, more and more about how they were being treated as individuals, and transparency. And I call that servant leadership, which I learned in the military. It's, take the hill, follow me, kind of mentality, and nurturing your people, on the journey, as you're going. And again, it's like treating people as equals. Where I don't care whether you're a janitor, or a vice president or a CEO. It's like everyone adds value to that organization, and that organization isn't successful without all those people. And as we're growing and getting big, we need a lot of people. So, I
What you
think
said
for the
really,
better, for
uh-huh.
the better of the world, that's some things that I think have had a positive impact. Is in the last 30, 40 years, there's been a shift away from the stick and my way or the highway and success at all costs to, hey, this is what we think, this is what we believe, this is what's in it for you, and here's the things we're doing for you. Help us, achieve, our own objectives. And so
I think you're right. What I think really stood out with what you're saying is I think back in the 80s, employees were viewed as, I think they even called them compliment.
yeah,
Like, here's another piece of compliment. They were almost like units that you could build your departments and have more of the units, almost like in the military where they call each person a troop. I had
yeah.
to add more troops. They weren't looked at as individuals that could be of great value to the company, which I think, like you're saying, we're going that direction. So there's a lot more opportunity for people if they search it out. I think, do you still think it's valuable to maybe it seems like we're kind of relatively undisciplined as we grow. And I know you started with the military, and I think that gave you an incredible sense of your your way to plan things, to be so meticulous and be so focused.
There's no
I don't think,
question, if I didn't join the service, I never become CEO of a company,
would you
especially a
say that
large
you say
company.
that now even?
Yeah, yeah, I can look back and say that, easily. So as a young man, the military taught me about discipline, teamwork, and leadership.
What
And
do you think it still is a valid thing for people who don't really know where to go if they're really young and they're struggling?
yeah, I think the military brings a lot to the table. People get out of it what they put into it. And so if they go in with a mindset of, I'm here for an education, I'm here for a GI Bill, I'm here to learn a skill, I'm here to, to participate, you can get a ton out of the military. Some people just go in, it's they're wandering, vagabonds, and at least with the military, I know where I need to be, when I need to be there, what I need to wear, and they're going to feed me and put a roof over my head. And so it can be a simple place too. But, I always went in with the mindset of, I'm here for an education, I'm here, to learn a skill, and I'm going to leave, and I'm going to parlay that into, call it the next version of me. And so for me, it was, a lot of technical schools. I worked on classified forward area air defense radar systems. And so I learned a lot, got an education. That became an engineering degree, engineering background. That became a Fortune 500, eventually crossed over into management and climbed the ranks, So, but I know that foundation, if I didn't have it, I never achieved, what I ultimately did, ultimately just because it was about teamwork, discipline, leadership, so I learned that I could get up. You're up at 5:30 in Australia, and we're doing this podcast, and so and it's tomorrow. If we could just figure out how you could tell me tomorrow what the stock market's going to do
I know
before
exactly.
tomorrow, it would be great, right? So it's afternoon the day before here, and you're in Australia, but it's like you're dedicated, you're up, you're put together, you're doing this. It's like I knew that there were smarter people in the world than me, but there was no one who could outwork me. There was no one who was going to get up earlier than me or go to bed later than me. It's like if I put my mind to getting something done, I'm going to make it happen, and failure is not an option. Something else the military teaches you: you have an obstacle. Can I go through it, around it, over it, under it? It's like, what do I need to do to get to the other side? And you don't stop until you get there, or you die trying. That's that kind of work ethic, is perfect. And that's what it takes.
So besides focus, incredible focus, you also have to be very adaptive and you have to be flexible and you have to be able to pivot as things come up. I mean, you have because I'm sure you've had so many experiences. Plus, you actually got to learn at the feet of Jack Welch, who was pretty famous in the business world. I mean, that's an incredible part of your history as well.
Yeah, again, it was a magical time, and one of the things that has really bothered me, I think, in recent years is now that the guy is dead and gone, how people Monday morning quarterbacks are trashing him and talking about GE and and the. But I'll tell you what, before tech, GE was number one on the Fortune 500 list. Jack was the world's most admired CEO,
And I
and
remember that time. I remember that time.
at that time. And
Before that, the latter,
GE, the
but
world's
yeah.
largest company, was doubling in size every 2.8 years because it was
And to
growing
work for
like
him was an
this.
honor back
And,
then.
and
It was
so
huge.
I call it, I was there for the Camelot era of all of that. Jack was a god to us, and so, I think people that look back and trash him, aren't treating him in relation to the time. Business was
Exactly.
different, the world
Exactly.
was different, and he was a god. He was he was a god of business. Back in that era, and the machine that he built was second to none, and he held that pace for more than a decade. And when he left in 2001 and retired, that's when I left. That's when a bunch of GE leaders left, and it was like changing of the guard, and that company never, no, it was a downhill, run from there.
It's
The
hard to
company.
relate if you weren't there, if you weren't
It
living
is.
at that time, if you couldn't relate. I'll give you, this is kind of a silly example, but there was a movie with Jack Nicholson called The Witches of Eastwick, which when it came out was a great movie. And there was this monologue, and Jack Nicholson was amazing and very forward at the time. And my daughter has very highbrow taste in movies and won't watch a lot of the ones that I want to watch with her, but she finally agreed to watch this with me. In today's time, it was the worst thing I've ever seen. I'm serious. It was so inappropriate. And what he said was ridiculous. I'm like, how could I ever have thought that was, you know what I'm saying? If you weren't there at the time, it's kind of hard to relate in some instances. And I think that was a really good example with Jack Welch as well, because he was at the top of the game
Yeah.
at that time.
And
There's
and
no
a
one.
different world, different, totally different world. Boy, the GE stories I could tell, would are entertaining, So, but it is, it is what it is. But that's where I learned how to run a business. The world's largest company doubling in size, every 2.8 years, had to grow your business at 30+%, per year. And if the world's largest company can do it, so can you.
And for it to double, I mean, it was huge then.
Yeah.
It was
Right.
huge.
World's largest company doubling in size every 3 years. It's like, so you can't tell me that your company's too big, it can't grow, and it can't grow at 30%. Every company I ran grew at better than 30%. So it can be done, and I think failure as an option, one of the biggest problems I see with entrepreneurs just in general today is if they have a bad year, if they have, if they're in some period of mediocrity, they can just accept it and say, oh, well, I tried. Well, let's assume that if you don't grow your business 30% in the next 12 months, you die. Your reward is you die. Let me tell you, you work differently, if that's the scenario. And so you find a way to get it done. And if it doesn't
That's a
work, you work
motivator.
harder, you pivot, you try something new. It's like, and too many people get complacent with some level of success. And it's kind of, it's an easy out for a lot of entrepreneurs to just say, well, yeah, I had an okay year, bad market. It's okay. It'll be better next year. It's like, nope. If your life depended on you hitting numbers and growing, it's like you would find a way to get it done. And and
I
so
agree. And
don't
complacence
accept
in health,
mediocrity out there, and
right.
and create that sense of urgency about yourself that you must succeed. Failure is death.
Well, I think that's a good way to motivate yourself. I really appreciate you giving me so much of your time, Adam. And for people who want to find out more, I suggest they go to Amazon and buy one of your four books. Would you recommend they start with let's see, The Empire Builder would be the best starter?
So spoiler alert, Empire Builder is my personal favorite. But the world still buys the private equity playbook, which was my original book, and they buy it in the most volume. And I do donate all my royalties to charity.
Uh-huh.
But that book still does fabulous. Hell, there's a second edition of the private equity playbook that's been updated, has expanded content, and the
Okay.
first edition still outsells the second edition.
Really?
The world just likes that book, and so it's required reading in a lot of executive MBA programs. So the world would tell you read or private equity playbook first. Adam would tell you read Empire Builder first. That teaches you how to build the business. Private equity teaches you who you're going to sell it to. The exit strategy playbook teaches you how to sell it for maximum value.
And one thing I learned from you too is that when you start a business, you should already be thinking about your exit. And that never even
From the
occurred to me.
beginning, day one,
That
it's
never
like I'm
occurred to
building
me.
something to sell. I'm building something to exit. How big is it going to be? How do I deconstruct that journey? And then that gives me the milestones I need to hit. If I don't know where I'm going, I don't know if I'm on the right track. I don't know when to slow down. I don't know when to speed up. I don't. It's hard to manage some nebulous future. I always start with that destination in mind, which I'm a pilot. Pilots don't take off unless we know where we're going. And then we deconstruct the trip. And so I would say read Empire Builder first, then read the private equity playbook, then read the exit strategy playbook. But hey, that's like the Star Wars trilogy, episode
It's
four,
a
five,
trilogy,
six. Then they
exactly.
did one, two, three. My
And then you
books
have
should
four
be
and
read in
five.
reverse order. It's like
And
that's
five coming out. And if you want more information about coaching with Adam or getting involved in any of his groups, we should go to your website, adamecoffee.com. You have the middle initial in there. It's not just adamcoffee.com,
Yeah,
it's
I
Adam
did
E.
that on
Coffee.
purpose. You're in Australia, so the cattle baron of Australia's name's Adam Coffey. There's
No
also
way.
like a serial killer who's named Adam Coffey out there somewhere. So it's like, I needed to differentiate which coffee I was. I'm not the cattle baron and I'm not the serial killer,
So
but people, I would tell you my most active social media platform is LinkedIn. You reach out to me on
perfect.
LinkedIn, you get me. I'm up at
Awesome.
4 every day. It's early part of my routine to be on LinkedIn and interact with people, hundreds of
Are you on
people.
LinkedIn as Adam Coffee or Adam E. Coffee?
Oh, if you just type in Adam Coffey, you'll find
You'll
me.
come up. Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
I'm sure there's a lot of Adam Coffeys, but I'm not hard to find.
You're not how you are. You come right up on LinkedIn. Believe me, I know
Yeah,
that. And Adam E for excellent on website, Adam E Coffee.
there you go.
Adam, thank you so much. This was such a pleasure.
Well, Stephanie, good to see you. Have fun in Australia, and
Thank you.
and to all your listeners out there, I wish
I
you
love it here.
success.
Take care, Adam. Thank
Bye
you.
now.